Welcome to the Black Belt Business Podcast. My name is Matthew Brenner, and today I'm with George Bryant in the house. I know it looks like his house is a big lit on fire in the background, but don't worry, everything's okay. I know when we first got on here, you were telling me that your landlord, who you rented studio space from, decided to kick you out last second. What happened?
Yeah, not kick me out, but I will say God likes to remind me there's no finish lines. And so I'll give the short story and everybody will laugh a little bit because I had my beautiful studio. I had like 5 studios set up, and I agree with the landlord. It was right next to his restaurant. So I had the best gig. My restaurant was next door. My barber and my masseuse were in like 10 feet of walking distance to me. So like I'm in heaven when clients came. And so had the studio, it was set up like a living room, and then I literally was sitting there, and there was one light on my floor that we hadn't hung on the ceiling yet. My buddy TJ came over. He's like, dude, we have to hang that light. Just finish the studio. And I'd put it off for like 6 months. And I was like, dude, it's fine. It's on a stand. And then he's like, I'm coming this Saturday. I'm like, great. So he comes Saturday. We hang the light. Monday, my landlord calls. And he's like, we have a family emergency. I know we did this. We promised you this. And I was like, oh my God, what happened? And ended up in the family of the daughter. And I was like, what do you need? He's like, I need you out. And I was like, oh, by when? And he's like, ASAP. And they're like family to me. And I was like, okay, I will totally support you however I can. And so we unpacked like 3,000 square feet. It's literally all looks like a bomb went off in my basement down here. And then I rebuilt this one in like 24 hours. And truth be told, I actually really enjoy being in my house again because the distance is a whole lot shorter from the treadmill over there to my thoughts in the studio. But it was a pretty funny reminder. And I was like, well, maybe if I didn't hang the light, he wouldn't have called. But of course, I hung the light, we finished. But we're here now, we're settled. As long as I have a video and some decent thing. And I didn't even know. That little fireplace thing is the best thing ever. It was just like this little digital display that I used to show the weather on, and they released an app that said I could put a fireplace in it, and it's the number one
Perfect.
thing
Yeah.
everybody talks about.
Yeah, they always say for videos online that you want something moving in the background. I've heard like Ryan Megan talk about that, something captivating,
Yeah,
and that is perfect for that.
yeah, and then the other thing too, and this box over here reacts to my voice, but I'm really present to it. There's this little box that every time I speak, it reacts to my voice. But I tell everybody, I'm like, hey, if you're on a Zoom call and you want people to pay attention to you, they're either going to be distracted somewhere else or they can be distracted looking at you. And I was
Mm,
like, so I might as well just keep them distracted looking at me. And so I keep
mm.
that thing reacting to my voice.
Yeah, the last thing you need is for that elephant back there is to just like lift up its trunk every like 10 minutes. It's like someone be like, is this house alive? What's going on over there?
Oh,
Uh,
and you, dude, it's so funny you say elephant. I picked my son up from school yesterday. He's 7, and he's like, Dad, there's a wild elephant in Montana. I live in Montana. And I was like, what do you mean there's a wild elephant in Montana? He's like, no, Dad, I saw it on the news today. I was like, bro, what story are you telling me, right? Because we're in story territory. And he's like, no,
yeah.
Dad, Google it. Well, I literally Google it, and 3 hours away from me, there was a circus in Montana yesterday, and the elephant escaped and was walking around downtown Butte, Montana.
Oh,
And I was like,
wow.
oh, this is hilarious.
That is amazing. So tell us about your background, because a lot of the people who are listeners are martial arts school owners. So
Yep.
did you originate in martial arts? You originate in helping people with relationships? How did this happen? How did you enter the martial arts
Yeah,
world?
so this is really interesting. And so as a kid, I actually did martial arts, and I'm gonna close this loop in a minute. But my first ever karate school was Valari's in Franklin, Massachusetts. Valari's in Franklin, Massachusetts, and then I had a pretty rough childhood. Like I was homeless, and a lot of things happened, and so I was pretty much on my own from 13. I had to, watch the movie Rad Racing and get a bike and a paper route, and basically use that to make it out. And then I joined the Marine Corps. So I
Okay.
spent 13 years of my life on active duty, and my entire job and goal was to be a Marine, retire at 30 years, and hand out smiley face stickers at Walmart. And after being in 2005, I almost lost both my legs in Somalia. And then 2010 and 11 in Afghanistan, I ended up getting 7 traumatic brain injuries. So I've had everything from getting shot, shrapnel, all that fun stuff, PTSD, all that magic. And so they decided they were going to medically separate me. And I struggled with eating disorders most of my life. And I didn't stay in martial arts, but in the Marine Corps, I ended up as a black belt martial arts instructor in the Marine Corps through, what we called, McMap, which was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that ended in death. And, I just got to play and fight all the time. And so never really practiced, ended up rolling, staying in Jiu-Jitsu for a while. Carlos Machado is one of my business partners and dear friends. So I'm in the world no matter what, but never talked to martial arts schools. And so I basically ended up becoming a food blogger. And I was bulimic most of my career because of the abuse as a kid and sexual abuse. And so I was like, I want to be better. I'd experienced enough death in my life. And so I was like, I need accountability. So I had to make a fake college email in 2010 to get a Facebook account. And I was like, I'm going to cook a recipe every day and I'm just going to post it on Facebook so nobody knows what I'm doing. Well, fast forward a year and a half later, someone's like, you should launch a blog. And I'm like, what's a blog? And so I ended up getting transitioned out of the Marine Corps and becoming a paleo food blogger. And then someone's like, oh, you should write a book. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. And my publisher's like, I'll never publish you. You can't. You'll never make it, blah, blah, blah. Well, then I became a 22-week New York Times bestselling cookbook author 2 years after teaching myself how to cook. And then someone's like, you should launch an app. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. I'll figure that out too. And then I launched an app and got featured by Apple's the #1 health app in 2015. Built 1 million followers on social media, and then ended up in the jungle with Mother Ayahuasca after lots of suicide attempts and depression and hospitalizations and really not having the best of luck, and met God. And I realized in 24 hours that that whole business was out of integrity for me. And so I came home, deleted 1 million followers, gave the company away to somebody in 24 hours as a Christmas present, disappeared off the internet for 3 years, and accidentally became a consultant. And so people started hiring me to teach them everything that I had done and how I had done it. And I ended up behind the scenes of some massive companies and scaled a couple companies to 1 billion. And over the years started consulting companies on basically relationship-based marketing. And ending up a couple of years later, I end up meeting a dear friend of mine, Nick Daughtry, who literally is in the martial arts world and has been in there forever, and then brings me in. We start doing calls and connecting, and then I start helping martial arts schools build and scale their businesses. And funny story, I was at an event, and the gentleman who bought my initial martial arts school from Fred Villari in Franklin, Massachusetts, was sitting in the audience, and we got to meet and connect, and we're still friends to this day. And so that's kind of like the shortest version where this whole thing doesn't get to be about my story, but you know, there's probably like 75 books in there, which is why I have a podcast, because I don't want to write another book about it, but it was I've lived many lives to get here, so that's the shortest version I can give you.
Well, if that's the shortest version, I'm gonna need ChatGPT to cut that down because I don't even know where to start with all that. And
Yeah,
I knew some of that from stuff I've listened to and looking at online, but I think it's kind of funny that you had a Dave Chappelle moment where it's like you're at your peak and you're like, I'm out, right?
yep.
This is not, it doesn't align with me. So what made you decide to finally move away from it all? Like you said, it didn't match your integrity or what you felt your
Well,
moral
so
compass.
yeah, so not my moral compass. What it looked like is I was 120 pounds heavier than I am now. My wife was 8 months pregnant with my son, and we were about 3 weeks away from bankruptcy. I was taking 90 hydrocodone a day. I was addicted to opiates. I was self-harming, and the things that I witnessed and the things that I experienced in my career and in my childhood were literally genuinely killing me. And when I had that social media following, when I had that business, it was where I hid, right? Like I didn't have a relationship with anybody because I was living on the internet. And so if I was just being intimate and vulnerable on the internet, but I had no connection with anybody in my real life, and I was just dead on the inside. And you know, I talk about it so easily, but it was like a 3.5 year slump of like massive depression, like to where my wife was like at 8 months pregnant, like I'm gonna have to get a job because you're not moving. Like I looked dead on the inside. And so I talk about it very easily because I've been in this work for a long time and I've been through for a while. But it was 3 years of therapy every day, every modality you can imagine, everything you can find, and it was just, it felt like living hell, and it sure was. And so I had to really come home, and I had a big come to Jesus moment, but it was really about who I wanted to be and losing the identity of my childhood, and then this whole career that I thought I was going to have in the Marine Corps, and then stacking on the things that I was taught and the things that I believed and the things that I saw. And like I turned 21 in Somalia, and that was the day I almost lost my legs. But the things that I witnessed at 21 years old, like genocide and death and destruction and war and seeing your friends get shot in the face and not coming home and blown up, and those things that they're just hard to reconcile in a human experience. And it always hurt me because I just love people to the core. And I was so isolated as a child. that I just always wanted family. And so I spent my whole life trying to run and create them. And it was really, really dark. And, I talk about it for people all the time to give them a permission slip, because it wasn't about like rigidity or intensity. It wasn't about like suffering. It was really about choosing to love myself and really like heal myself and recognize that I'm perfect, whole, and complete. And those things that I've experienced and witnessed don't define who I am, as long as I continue to try to be better and make that healing. And I also recognize that's one of the reasons I'm so good at what I do in marketing, because like I have the most amount of empathy for people ever, and I understand the work that we do. Like I understand with martial arts schools, right? Like if it wasn't for that school when I was a kid that I got to go to, I don't know where I would have ended up, because it was the only structure I had, and they didn't know I was homeless. They didn't know I didn't have family supporting me. And so that was like a home for me. And so when I see the things that we do now in schools that exist, like we're giving chances for kids to have a life. We're giving them structure that sometimes they don't get at home. We're giving them a family that they might not have. Like we don't know what happens outside of the four walls of our dojo, and sometimes we do, and it breaks our heart. But like if it wasn't for people like that, I wouldn't be here today. And that's something that's like really, really resonant in my heart, because, all the rest of it, the accolades, the scaling the companies to 1 billion, all that stuff doesn't matter. They're really byproducts about caring about people and helping people achieve results and get things into their life. And like, that's the hill that I want to die on for the rest of my life, is people. Like at the end of the day, I say this to people in business all the time, like without people, you don't have a business. Can't complain about the people that aren't clicking or buying on your ads, because they're also the ones that are paying your bills and paying for your car and paying for your staff. And like, these are human beings. And so, it never should have gotten to the point that it got to, but the internet made it lazy, right? Like we forget that before the internet, people had multi-million-dollar businesses without transacting with people, without having 7 upsells and disconnected funnels, and treated people like common human beings. And I ask people all the time, I'm like, if you treated somebody on the internet the same way you do when they walk in the front door of your school, you'd get punched in the face. And I was like, think about it, right? Like if you even tried to read to them one of your ads or one of your posts when they walked in your door, they wouldn't even pay attention to you, because it's missing the connection. And we forget that. Like we forget that when people buy things or they join things or they sign up for things, like they're trying to be better versions of themselves, right? But there's human emotions involved in that. And so it's a big, big, big topic for me. And yeah, I talk about the numbers all the time, because everyone's like, well, how'd you scale that company from $1 million a month to 2 million a day in 2 years? And I was like, it wasn't a strategy and tactic. It was about caring about people. It was about helping them get results. It was about meeting them where they are. And so I feel like I was gifted the life that I had and the experiences that I had to be able to really understand what it's like to be in the before state of most of the people that we're trying to sell products and services to. And so that's kind of how I see it now.
Hmm. Yeah, in martial arts, we're in the most high impact relationship. One of the most high impact relationship businesses. Like whenever we have a new employee, I mean, listen, most businesses help people, right? You wouldn't be
Yep.
in a business unless you're helping someone. But if if you sell life insurance, you're definitely helping a family feel more secure about their future,
Yep.
provide income for them in the future, hopefully. You sell someone a car that can get from A to B safely. But in martial arts, you actually see every day the benefit of what you actually give to them. And that is so beautiful, because you don't
It's
get
the
that in other
greatest gift.
situations.
And
Right?
I just want to applaud you and like honor you for that, because like I beat so many people that don't understand that. And sometimes we see it, but we forget it, right? Like we forget that like even in a school that has kids, like a kid's formidable years, they're developing their paradigm for how they see the world 0 to 8. And sometimes people don't realize that in your schools, you have more influence and impact on the success of that child as an adult than they do at their own home. And like that's a big, big deal. Like that's playing with life and impact. Like we're
Mm.
empowering the next generation to know how to have discipline and structure and de-escalate and communicate and following things that literally set them up for life. Like I don't take that lightly. I think that's the most important thing to recognize that's happening, no matter how many systems or funnels we have or what programs we have or what after school thing. Like never forgetting what it's really about at the core, which is we're empowering kids or adults to be the hero of their own journey and become new versions of themselves that are taught through whatever martial arts discipline you teach. But the frameworks of all of them are really about being a massively integrous, good person, about understanding the benefits that you can create in the world, about learning how to fight, to never use it so that you can be there of service, but also to have the discipline to be solid, emotionally solid, physically solid, right? To work in a team, to work in cohesion, to have humility, right? Like these are all like the traits that are missing in the world right now. And like I look at martial arts schools and I'm like, you literally have the ability to change the future. Like that's what it's about every day. So I love it.
Whenever we have a student come in who is particularly challenging, maybe they have ADD or ADHD, or maybe like a really just like a rough upbringing, and it's frustrating on our staff, I remind them like, hey, this is the person that's going to appreciate this the most when they're older, or even right now. Like we had a kid come in who, this is more recently, who the grandma brought him in. The mom was a teen mom of the kid, so she didn't really know how to raise a child,
Yeah.
right? And it was her second child at the age of, she had two kids before the age of like 22, right? And just the situation she's in, and so the grandmom's kind of in charge of the kid. He comes in, he's only fed negative. What's the word? Negative. He only hears negativity from his mom, right?
Yep.
And in order to get him to do things, the way she would motivate him was threaten like monsters and ghosts.
Yep.
Like, you better do this or the ghost is going to come. You better do this or the monster's going to come. Or you better this or the police are going to come. And that is how he reacted. So he's scared to go to bed at nighttime because that's what's going to happen. So someone's going to hurt him. And when he comes into our school, we have such a great opportunity to change his brain chemistry, right? To like, hey, when you come here, it's going to be positive reinforcement. And when the grandma came and brought him in, she's telling me all these things. First of all, he's lucky to have an angel grandmother who's going to come in, bring him all the time, and pay for things. Right?
Yes.
Martial arts is not cheap. All right.
Nope.
The second thing is that when she came in after maybe about a week or two, she's like, hey, I happen to be the one that helped her personally. And I was like, hey, I know that when you first came in, you were looking for discipline and you want him to be able to like focus and hear positive reinforcement. And she said, yeah, I do. But like right now in class, he's not really listening. And look at him, like, look what those other kids are doing. Look at him. And she's like, I think we're going to take him out. And this is like probably 3 weeks in. And I'm like, and at this point, I think in the future, or in the past, I would have tried to just like say, save her or be like, oh, well, you have a membership or oh, whatever. But I just decided I'm going to take a leadership role. I'm like, no, you cannot do that. That is the worst decision you can make for him right now. Mm-hmm. You came here because he acts like that, because he needs help. So when he comes here and needs that help and doesn't act appropriately, now you're going to take him out. That doesn't make any sense. That's like saying, hey, you're not allowed to brush your teeth because you have so many cavities. Right?
Yes. That is such a good way to say that.
Yeah.
I'm totally stealing that, and I'm giving you full credit when I rip that out on a podcast later today. And I'm like, no, Matthew Brenner said this. I love that. I love that.
Yeah. And it's just like, it's so frustrating when parents give up on their kids too early, or in this case, a grandparent. Now, she keeps on bringing them, so it's been good since then. But a lot of times those instructors, will hide behind, oh, you have a contract, or, oh, you, like they'll hide on extrinsic motivation when really the motivation should be intrinsic. Like, no, he needs this. I'm telling you right now, you cannot take him out of this. And it comes from a different part of the heart when you say it like that, as opposed to, hey, you owe us, $800. So
yeah, can I share two things? So I don't normally do this, but I got a message from a martial arts school yesterday. So there's a book that every single human, and I mean, if you have influence over people, adults, children, speaking, that is a required read. And it's called The Declarative Language Handbook by Linda Murphy. A Declarative Language Handbook by Linda Murphy. And because I don't have his permission to share this thing with him, I just want to read this to you. It's very, very short. I had a little boy come into my school, pretty heavy on the autism spectrum. He was really struggling in class. I had my staff read the Declarative Language Handbook that you suggested on one of your Zoom calls. Wow, what a difference that made. The parents who live paycheck to paycheck came in and said, We have saved and want to pay for a year up front. We can't lose this. Next week, he's adding a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class and still doing his Ninja Dragon class, all because of how we communicated to that child, right? And so it's a very, very important thing. And you nailed it, man. Like, everything here is about coming from the heart, right? Like, we know that they want something different. That's why they're there in the first place. But they also need to have tangible physical evidence and see it in their real life in order for them to believe it. And so the second book that I want to recommend, and I did an entire breakdown of this on my podcast, is called The Catalyst by Jonah Berger. And the reason I recommend that book so heavily is because there's only 5 things that get in the way of us becoming a catalyst for somebody's change. And it's reactance, distance, endowment, corroborating evidence, and uncertainty. And they are psychologically the only 5 things that get in the way. But in the lens of business and marketing, it also lets you see what evidence and how to give people evidence to support them to be able to see themselves in that situation and have a commitment deeper than what you were talking about, which is like all the intrinsic or the surface level details where, you know, when we know, and I know this to be true, when a parent comes in and says, I'm going to pull my kid out, what I hear is I'm afraid and I don't want to pull them out. And this is my way of asking for help because I don't see the value. Because if you and I have kids and we really don't want our kid in something, I'm not going to drive to the school and tell the instructor, I'm going to pull my kid out and get a chargeback on my credit card, right? If there's really, really enough evidence. This is what I tell people about haters on the internet all the time too. I'm like, if somebody really hates you, they don't take the time to tell you how much they hate you. They just block you. And I've turned more haters into customers than anybody because I just love bomb them. I'm like, oh my God, thank you for the feedback. Where else does this show up? How can I help you, right? When people are saying things out loud, what they're really saying is, I don't feel safe. I feel scared, but I don't want to admit that. I'm asking for help, and how you respond and how you support me and how you communicate with me is either going to give me more evidence that I'm right to justify my decision, or it's going to dissipate that evidence and give me another possibility, which would create a catalyst for change. Those 2 books, and I mean those 2 books, will change the face of everybody's martial arts schools if they actually read them and take them in. And like, I'll say this publicly, I've read The Catalyst over 100 times, like literally over 100 times. And it made Jonah Berger and I become friends because he emailed me and he's like, who are you? I've heard your name 500 times. I'm like, bro, I've recommended your book to thousands of people, but I have it memorized. Like, I can tell you what page and what chapter. But what we have to understand, and you nailed this earlier too, is even in the lens of marketing, marketing is just putting wrapping paper around a present to meet somebody where they are so that we can be the catalyst for their change, right? And it's the wrapping paper that gets adjusted all the time, but that's our job as leaders. That's our job as marketers. That's our job as instructors, right? I'm like, if we have a mat full of kids and we tell them to do something or instruct them on something and they're not doing it, it's insanity to keep saying it the same way over and over and over and over again, expecting a different result. And I was like, well, marketing is no different, and neither is leadership. Leadership is reinventing ourselves to meet somebody where they are in order to have them move one step closer. And the specific chapters, and I'll even tell everybody, and this is going to open loops for you. It's called the Zygarnik effect, but it'll drive you nuts. And now you have to buy and read the book. But the 2 chapters I would start with, number 1 is reactance. And reactance is a human being's anti-missile guidance system, to where if somebody's in a state, like a state of overwhelm, a triggered state, they're upset, and we try to justify with words, the only thing it does is put their walls up higher and higher and higher because they're not in a state to receive it. And the second one is distance. And Jonah Berger explains this beautifully, but what we also forget is that as instructors, as martial arts school owners, we're living in the dream after state, right? Like, we are so far removed from what it's like, even for us to even sometimes have empathy for what that parent feels or what that kid feels, because we've been on the mat for 20 years, we've been teaching this forever, and they're walking in cold. And what he talks about is that if you think about it in the lens of a football field, we're living on the other side of the end zone and they're sitting on the opposing team's end zone. And we're like, great, come in, jump all the way to our end zone. It doesn't work that way. When somebody comes in, they have to have episodic memory or evidence in their life that they can do that, right? And so when they come in, they really can only see to the 5-yard line. But once they make it to the 5, they can then see to the 15. Once they make it to the 15, they can see to the 50. Once they make it to the 50, they can see our end zone and they can commit to that. But we also tend to overwhelm people and get people overcommitted without recognizing what's happening subconsciously in their body because it feels overwhelming, right? Just like if you've never been to the gym before and you walk in, hire a trainer, and they give you a 1 hour workout to do on your own with movements you've never done before, there's zero chance that you're going to consistently do that. But if they get you to come into the gym for 10 minutes, they play around, they show you one movement, they get you really, really confident. When you come back to the gym tomorrow, you're not only going to feel comfortable doing those, but you're going to be like, what's next? What's next, right? And it's atomic habits and building that evidence and momentum. And so I tell everybody, and I help a lot of martial arts schools. They listen to my podcast, they DM me, they're in my alliance, they're in all these places. But those two books are like requirements for me because it helps you understand deeper than the school and deeper than our programs and deeper than our coaching, like what's happening in their bodies to empower us to be able to make a difference for them.
And if you're listening to this now, like if I wasn't recording this podcast on here with you, I would go buy it immediately so it shows up in my door so I don't forget later. So if you're listening to this, pause it, order it, come right back. And I'll put the books in the show notes as well.
I have a link that I'll send you, Matt. What I did too, because I've recommended the book so much, is I actually recorded a video per chapter and breaking it down on how I see it because I've read it so much. And I'll give you the link to that because it's just give me your email. There's no offer or anything. It's just because I deliver the 6 videos to be able to take you through it. But it's massively, massively valuable. It is one of the number one secrets to being able to understand the psychology of people when they're in commitment zones, right? When they're coming in to join the school, right? Because we also know, and I say this to people all the time, and you guys get this as martial arts owners, like leadership is saying the same thing as many times as required till the last person gets it, right? And that comes from the Marine Corps, right? We were only as strong as our weakest Marine. But I also feel like it was the biggest lesson for me because I hate to tell you, but like when my Marines weren't performing, we can't fire each other. Like it's all of us for 3 years, no matter what, right? There's no such thing as, oh, you're fired. I'm going to hire somebody else. I'm going to replace you. It's like, no. In 6 hours, we get to go outside this wire together and all of us get to come home and we get to work as a team. And like, I think that's how people should look at business because if somebody takes the time to raise their hand, it's my job to get them to where I promised them, not my job to gaslight them because they're not doing it my way. Just like if I help my son with something and I teach him to do something and he doesn't do it or he doesn't get the result, I don't gaslight my son and say, oh my God, you're such a failure. Go figure this out on your own. I'm like, no. Who do I get to be as a father? Who do I get to be as a leader to help him get those results? And, everybody wants to build and scale their business, but scale comes from retention, not acquisition, right? And it comes from depth on the back end, not shallow transactions. And so the more tools that we have, the better. And those are 2 of the ones that literally change the game.
That's awesome. Thanks for recommending that. And it had me, the thing you said about comments, because I want to go back to that, where people come to you, or they either A, comment negatively on whatever, an Instagram post or something, or B, they come to you and say, hey, I want to quit martial arts. I want to take them out. I was listening to a podcast with James Sexton. Have you ever heard of him? Mm-hmm. He's like the divorce attorney. If you haven't heard, like search his name on Spotify or something. And he's a divorce attorney and talks about, and I just love it. Like I listened to like every episode I could find that he was a guest on because it was so good. And he's a divorce attorney, so you don't want to end up in his office, right? So when you end up in his office, you're getting a divorce, so it's a bad time. And he's able to talk to so many people that have marriages that are failing. And because he gets so deeply ingrained in it, he shares like what things usually lead to divorce, right? Because he has a really cool perspective on it. And I'll give you tools and strategies so you don't end up in his office. And one of the things he says is there's something a lot worse than hate. So sending you a message saying, hey, your video sucks, or they comment on one of my posts and say, hey, your voice sounds like a mixture between SpongeBob and Squidward. Which is a really good one. And I get that one more often, I'd like to admit, but it's actually really solid and accurate. Is indifference. That's way worse.
Way worse.
Indifference is way worse than hate. Hate is like, I care enough to tell you.
Yes.
Right? Indifference is, hey, I'm not showing up to class because you suck and I'm going to charge back my credit card.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Indifference and silence are the 2 that scare me the most.
Is there a difference between the 2? Indifference is...
I think so. Like, I feel like I feel like I've had the pleasure of having people be indifferent but tell me, which I think they thought they were indifferent, but really, like, you nailed it. It's that indifference and silence. Like, those two are the ones that scare me, because everything else is just a thank you. I can get better now.
Hmm. So, talking about relationships, how do we build better relationships with our martial arts students that you feel like now working with martial arts schools that a lot of them get wrong?
Yeah, well, I'll even summarize this, because there's three big mistakes that people make with customer journey, and I talk about these often, like I'm like a broken record, but they apply so much to martial arts schools, so much, right? So I break them down and I have everybody draw them in a triangle, right? So I'm like, just draw a triangle on a piece of paper, right? Because I'm not doing visuals today. And in the middle of the triangle, draw a poop emoji, because it used to be called the triangle of death, but my 7-year-old renamed it the triangle of poop because he's heard me teach it so many times. And there's a really funny story to go with this one. I'll tell you later. But there's three core mistakes that everybody makes. So number one is called the zone of doubt, right? So I write that at the top of the triangle. Number two is called the inverse journey on the bottom right. And then number three is called the drown the journey, right? And before I explain these, I also want to call everybody out and explain what this means. So most of the mistakes that we make aren't made around our offers and programs. They're made around the relationship with the human that get in the way of them pursuing or achieving the goals that we offer in our offers and programs, right? And so we also understand that every decision a human being makes is an emotional based decision, right? When you choose to follow somebody on Instagram, when you choose to buy something, when you choose to opt into something, there's an emotional based decision that's happening. And for an emotional based decision to go through, you have to feel safe. And everyone's like, oh, not really. I'm like, really? Have you ever been in a store about to buy something and then the clerk or somebody in the store talked to you negatively and you put the product back up and left because of how they made you feel, right?
Mhm.
Or have you ever been in a restaurant, enjoyed the meal, and then was talked to a certain way, and no matter how good the food was, you made a decision to never go back to that restaurant even though the food was good? Like, that had nothing to do with the food, right? And so the first thing that I want to say is that when we understand business and marketing, our programs, services, and offers are the bridge, right? They're the bridge to the island. I always use Manhattan as an example, right? But they're a bridge to the island. What we're really selling is Manhattan, but we fall into the trap of constantly trying to sell the bridge and the path to get there, right? And so these are the mistakes that get in the way. So the zone of doubt is basically the commitment remorse zone, right? So don't write this down, but you're going to want to rewind this one to hear the dictionary definition I wrote. But the zone of doubt is the space between the opt-in, exchange of information, or credit card purchase where the dopamine is wearing off. The longer that zone exists, the faster the undercurrent of your customers or potential customers' anxieties and doubts take over, deteriorating both of your chances of success. And so the zone of doubt happens everywhere. When somebody calls you and you're like, oh, I'll get back to you in an hour. And then 4 hours later, you send them a message, you've already dug yourself into a hole that you can't get out of because you made a commitment and a contract, and they're waiting on that side. So the moment that hour passes, everything past that point is evidence that they don't feel safe. When somebody opts into something and you're like, hey, we'll send it to you right away, and then they go to their inbox and it's not there, what's that experience like? And I always teach this to people by saying, like, hey, have you ever bought a course on the internet? They're like, yeah. I'm like, have you ever gone to your inbox looking for it and then it wasn't there? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, what feeling happened in your body? And they're like, oh my God, I got upset. I got mad. And I was like, what was your first thought? You're like, this was a bad choice. And I'm like, yes, because then you had to go do the work to find the thing that you already paid for that somebody told you they were going to send you, right? And so the zone of doubt is where any human being is at a decision point or a connection point with us, and we don't manage the conversation or expectations. And we allow them to sit in that commitment remorse zone. And that's the number one killer. That's the number one thing I use to double, triple businesses. And it's not about sending them 8 emails. It's not about, following up with them intensely. It's about managing the conversation, because that's what leadership does, right? So it's completely fine if somebody opts in or signs up or calls you and says, hey, thank you so much for texting me. I will get back to you in the next 48 hours and maybe even sooner, but I just wanted to let you know. And in the interim, if you need anything, here's how to get a hold of me. It's really about managing the conversation. It happens in digital marketing all the time. When we get people to opt in for phone calls, when we get them to sign up on our calendar link, when we tell them to send us a message and we'll get right back to them, you also have to remember you're not the only person people are talking to. They're out collecting evidence to see who makes them feel the safest before they feel safe to come in. So that's the zone of doubt. The second one is the easiest one to fix, and it's the hardest muscle to flex, and it's called the inverse journey. And so the inverse journey is when communicating with a customer or potential customer that you're ever talking about yourself instead of them, their results, or what they're going to achieve. And so if you're listening to this and you're going to write something down to remember, write this down. Your customers' results will tell them everything they need to know about you. Your customers' results will tell them everything they need to know about you. And so a tangible example, and I've helped a lot of martial arts schools with this, is that people will come in and be like, oh my God, tell me about your program. And we will just accidentally fall into the trap of like, yeah, we made this program for this and this. I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm a 1700th black belt degree, blank, 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 blank. But we think that's creating aspiration for the person, but we're actually giving them evidence that it's unachievable because it's making the gap feel insurmountable. But a simple reframe in that declarative language handbook that I recommended is also like, oh my God, well, we have this program that helps with this, but what are you looking for? And they're like, well, this. I'm like, well, yeah, you'll be able to do this, and Johnny will be able to see this, and he'll be able to feel this, and he'll be able to experience this, and it will help him do this, and you do this. And so it's making sure that when we're communicating an empowering language for what they're trying to achieve, not what we want them to achieve. Right. And so I give this example all the time. So if there's women listening to this and you've ever bought a skincare product on the internet, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because you'll buy the product after spending 90 days thinking about it, or you'll sign up for a service or coaching program and you'll get an email that says like, hey, thanks so much for buying my product. I've spent the last 16 years of my life scouring the jungles of Costa Rica to find this hidden ingredient. And I got 6 board certified surgeons next to me because we care about your skin. And the woman reading that's like, you don't give a crap about my skin. This is all about you and making money. But the inverse is like, hey, how's it feel to have healthier hair, skin, and nails, even though you haven't even got our product yet? Because we're a family and we know our product isn't the solution. It's just part of it, but we're here to support you. Dudes see this all the time with workout programs, supplements, right? Nothing like buying a product for yourself and then being told for the first 3 emails, like, look at me and my six pack. Look how strong I am. Look how amazing I am. And all that's disempowering for the person on the other side. And so it's making sure we're intentional about how we're communicating, but we're always communicating to somebody's possibility in their future state. So that's the second mistake. And then the third mistake is called the drown the journey. And I am doing this to everybody right now, but your subconscious brain learns about 1,500 times faster than your conscious brain. So you can also rewind this episode and listen. But the drown the journey is where we get lazy or unintentionally spend somewhere between 30, 60, 90 days courting somebody. And then the moment they buy, we send them an email that says, hey, thanks so much for joining our program. I need you to whitelist our email, add this thing, watch this video, fill out this paperwork all in the next hour, because you have to be in class in a day. And then they come to the class and they're not done. And then we gaslight them for not getting it done and making them feel bad and wrong. But we also forget that when people are joining something or they're starting something, they don't have an established habit. They don't have this in their life before. Just because a parent's coming to sign a kid up for school at a martial arts school doesn't mean they even have the time in their schedule. They might have to figure out kid care. They might have to figure out commuting. They've never had them in a program for an hour a day. So there's a lot of things that are happening that the parent or the child have to be empowered to, because they don't have the habit or the thinking or the beliefs or the paradigm to be that student yet. And so this is where we accidentally overwhelm them, creating more reactants rather than empowering them and creating micro wins to get them in momentum. And so those are the big 3 that everybody makes, accidentally most of the time, but they're the ones that get in the way of everything. And so those are the 3 that I always talk about.
I think it all comes down to really like trust in the end, right? Is that the whole purpose of it, right? It's like,
Well,
how do I
it
build
has to
trust
be.
between this person?
Well, it has to be too. And then here's the thing, right? Like, we have people that come and join our schools, and I ask people all the time, like, how long do you want them to be a student? And they're like, oh my God, like 5 years. I'm like, great. So then why, the moment they sign up, do you give them 3 years of work on day one instead of actually just taking them on a journey and helping them feel comfortable, right? Because we know if somebody walks in the door cold, or they come from an ad, or they come from something cold and then they get thrown on the mat, they're not going to be there. But then when they walk in, they get a tour of the school, the kid gets to sit in a class, they get to come to the after school thing. All of that is giving them evidence to allow them to feel safe to come into it, just like a kid joining a new school, right? Like, this kid hasn't been here. He doesn't know these kids. He doesn't know the people on the mat. He sees kids in uniforms, standing in structure and discipline, following the rules, and his nervous system's like, right? Like you have to titrate them in, but you also have to titrate them into the programs and into the experiences. But the same thing on the internet. Just because somebody shoots you a DM and says, oh my God, I'm so interested in joining, doesn't mean that you just send them a link and you're like, great, join now. I'll see you when you get here. Right? They raised their hand, but they also have to be met the same way. And I say this to people, and martial arts schools have the best view because you have a brick and mortar business. But if we took the same way that we treated people in a martial arts school and put it into a grocery store or into a brick and mortar business, that's like saying the moment you walk into the store and you ask me a question, I'm like, great, you have to buy it right now. You can't go walk around. You can't go pick it up and put it down. You can't go try it on. You can't ask me questions. I need you to do it right now. And what it does is it takes agency away from people and it conditions codependency. And then we get upset that 3 weeks in, 4 weeks in, oh my God, this parent's so upset. They keep asking me all these questions. They call me all the time. They're complaining about this. That's conditioned. That's a conditioned behavior because they don't feel safe because they weren't indoctrinated right. They weren't brought into the family the right way. And so it always has to be about safety because without a relationship, nobody can buy, nobody can continue because they feel disempowered. And any point past them feeling unsafe, everything we try to give them just creates more reactance. And so the thing here is like the easiest way to think about it is I'm like, if you go back to when you opened your martial arts school, right? Like first 50 students, if you treat everybody like you did then, your business would be 10 times greater, but somewhere along the line, you got convinced that I can't do that anymore. I have to automate that out. I have to put them into a system. And you actually automated out all the things that worked instead of automating the things that happen in between those touch points and allowing you to be there at the critical points that matter, right? Like I have no chance of succeeding in business if someone's like, hey, George, I'd love to work with you. I'm like, great, go through my ManyChat funnel before you figure it out. No, I'd love to connect with you. Let's see how this goes. Oh, yeah, I'm really interested in that. Amazing. Let me send you this thing and then let me know when you're done, right? And leadership in marketing and business and coaching and having kids on the mat is meeting them where they are and empowering them to step to the next step without them needing us because that's codependency. And so we have to always remember that the human relationship is the thing that makes it all work. Because if Johnny doesn't feel safe, Mummy's not going to feel safe. If Mummy doesn't feel safe, Johnny's not coming to class, right? And those two things have to happen independently. And so we have to make sure that we're always prioritizing the relationship. But the thing that I ask people all the time, and I'm like, okay, cool. If you took your wife and she went through your onboarding process, would you be stoked at her experience? And they're like, no. And I'm like, then why is it okay that my wife goes through it? Or like, if you wouldn't be okay with how your kid was treated if they came into your school or joined your program or clicked on that advertisement or came into that, why would you make it think that somebody else's would be okay? Like we're playing with human emotions and human relationships, but without the relationship, there's no chance in revenue. And this is what people see. They'll get people to join and then they'll have their savages, right? The ones that'll do it no matter what. But there's 4 personality types when it comes to people, right? There's controllers, promoters, supporters, and analyticals. Controllers are the type A, right? They're going to walk in, tell you what they want, tell you what they need, and they're just going to do it, sign up, and go, right? Parents are like, I want Johnny in. Johnny's going to do this. Johnny's like a little savage from Cobra Kai, right? Amazing. Promoters, their personality requires evidence to be able to justify their decisions. So they actually have to feel something. They have to see something. They have to roll on a mat in an intro class. They have to try on a gi and be brought into class for a few times. They have to know that they're going to learn this, this, and this to be able to communicate effectively. Supporters have to see other people having results so they can see themselves in those results, right? And then analyticals need every single detail required. And they're the ones that want to know your program, your contract, how many classes, how many can I come to, right? And they're all 4 different independent personality types, but they all require different evidence, but they're all part of the game. And the meat of customers, about 70% make up promoters and supporters, and then the analyticals and controllers make up the rest. But we tend to build our businesses, our programs, and our onboarding processes for the controllers, and then wonder why everybody else falls out. So then you get this slew of people who are in, but normally all right around the same mark. And everybody listening to this knows where it is. Oh, right around that like 60-day mark, they're always like trying to justify leaving, and I'm trying to convince them to stay. And it's always this and this. That's a conditioned behavior from the touch point from when they came in, because you nailed it, right? Like, you're not going to see a change in 3 weeks. But if I don't tell them when they're coming in that, hey, this is a long game. And the way that we do this is by building confidence and momentum over time. And it's about consistency, not intensity, because we can't ungrain these habits overnight. And so we love this program because when every kid comes in, we start with foundations. And my son's in jiu-jitsu, and I love it because he's not even allowed to learn jiu-jitsu until they demonstrate life skills around discipline, around respect, around integrity. And then I have to sign it, and his school teachers have to sign it. And until that goes in, they're not allowed to get on the mat and roll because they have to earn the right to roll. And that's at their pace. And so Branson gets to go to class and play the games and do it. But when they get to drilling, if he hasn't done his life skills, he's not allowed to drill because that's the foundational requirement. But because they set that expectation for us, we know that's what it is. And then we're supportive as parents. And we have a measure to help hold them accountable because that's the relationship part that's so important.
And I think people, when they're starting new, we want to tell them all the great things that are going to happen, right?
Yep.
Hey, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be fun. You're going to love it. It's going to build focus and confidence. But where a lot of trust is built was when you say the negative, and you say the negative first, right? So you say, hey, guess what? This is going to be challenging. In fact, we're purposely going to make it very difficult for Johnny. And there's going to be times where he's going to want to quit. And I don't care how excited he is right now. It's kind of like a new toy. No matter how fun a new toy is, eventually it's going to go under a couch somewhere and collect dust, right? Right? So same thing here. He's new and exciting, but at some point he's going to come to you. And he's going to say, I don't want to train anymore. He's going to say, it's too difficult. I don't like sweating. It's hard. And that's where you're going to have to make a decision as a parent. Hey, do I want him to keep on going so he can get the goals that you want for him, which is insert blank, whatever they said, or do I want to give up because it's more convenient?
So bro, I just got to give you so much credit for this. Like, yes, keep going. But like, I just had to kudos you because I feel very called to give them the solution. I normally don't talk about this publicly, but there's 5 steps that I have, and one of them is that. So keep going on this because I'm going to give you more kudos.
I appreciate that. Yeah, so talk about the negative and say, like, I want, before we even move forward, I want confirmation for you. And that conversation happens in the car, that you're going to make him stick with it because that is where he's going to benefit the most. Not when things are fun and exciting, when things are hard and difficult. Can I have that confirmation from you? And they go, yeah. Sure. And the sale is easy, right? Then they're saying, hey, like I need this, I want this, right? And the other part with relationships and social accountability is like people want to know what their short-term goal is and what their long-term goal is, right? So you give them too much in the beginning. And as a consultant, for me, like when I coach people too, like other martial arts schools, I did this all wrong in the beginning. I would get so excited to have someone new. I'd be, okay, you're going to change your school this way and this way and this way and this way. And I would give them way too many things. And then it would just be overbearing and difficult, and they wouldn't get it done, and I'd be upset at them, and they'd be upset they didn't get the results they want. After a couple of weeks, it'd fall apart. And it's like, okay, what could we do to get someone a small win as quickly as possible? And in martial arts, it's pretty easy. They can earn their white belt, right? So we kind of have that built into martial arts. If it's consulting, it's like, okay, what can I do to have new money in door right away? So that way it's justified in your mind about why you made this purchase. Right? And it's, oh, look, it's already happening. Right. So that first call, I know, hey guys, here's one little tiny tweak. If you do this with your next 100 students, it's so tiny and small, you'll make an extra $68,000 this year. So you'll, 6 times my investment with me, even if you do nothing else with the program. They're like, oh my God. Yeah, okay, great. Right.
You're getting me tickled, bro, because there's 2 things that you called out. So number 1 is on the pre-handling objections, but number 2, about the win. The mistake that martial arts schools make is they try to make the win on the mat instead of the win in the life outside of the dojo. So I'll give you an example of what we did at my son's martial arts school, and they still do this to this day. Even if you come in for like a walk around or like an intro thing or here, they send you out with a packet of what life skills are required and how to do them at different levels so the parents can take them home and use them as the kids, whether they join the school or not. So this is what we mean by discipline, and here's how Johnny can practice it. Oh, and by the way, even if you guys don't join, and you bring this back filled out, we'll give him a t-shirt that matches that life skill so that he can have it. So every time he wears it, it's a reminder that he's being disciplined or he's being honest. And so it creates evidence in everybody's life. And so I say this to people all the time. Customer journey is not what happens in the dojo. It's what happens outside of it, because that's where they have literally 23 other hours of their life. And our job is to ethically poach as much real estate as possible that empowers them to realize that they are doing those or becoming the hero of their own journey, which creates a social trigger that anchors it into us. And so that is a giant hole that I solve for almost everybody, because it also happens that if I give those to Johnny and he doesn't join my school and mommy and daddy help support him in those and see results, and then Johnny comes back, Johnny's already a better student before he even joined my program. And it only added value. And then I didn't have somebody sign up and try to convince them that I'm the answer or that I'm the solution. They got to see it in their real life. Okay. So you nailed it. Now on your pre-handling thing, if you don't tell somebody they're going to get a flat tire and they do, they'll slash the other 3 instead of calling AAA. That's the whole point of pre-handling objections. And I will tell a specific story, and this is a supplement company I owned. We literally, everybody wanted creatine in pill form. And if you take creatine every day, the dosage is 5 milligrams. If you've ever seen a 5 milligram pill, it's the size of my thumb. It's massive, right? So these pills were huge. And so we were getting like a 38% refund rate, even though they asked for it. We put the size up there next to a quarter and everything. But then the only thing we changed is on the product detail page, and every email that followed, we're like, yes, they really are that big. That's what you asked for. But if you don't like taking them, mix them into a smoothie, cut them up with a pill cutter. You can do blank, blank, blank. And it literally reduced refunds by like 31%, right? So there's 5 steps to solve those 3 mistakes. And these are communication steps, and they're ubiquitous, which means they apply to every conversation, every DM, every sales call, every offer, every email you send, everything, right? These are required human communication modalities, okay? So there's 5 steps. Step number 1 is acknowledge. Step number 2 is prepare. Step number 3 is project. Step number 4 is pre-handle. And step number 5 is excite. But what I want you to think about is acknowledge and excite as the bread of the sandwich, and prepare, project, and pre-handle as the meat inside of the sandwich, right? So acknowledge and excite are the container. Okay, so when I meet somebody in person, or when somebody asks me a question, even when I'm answering their question, I use these 5 steps. And I'll be like, oh my God, Matt, that's such an incredible question. It's shocking that nobody asked me that, but you nailed it. I have a recommendation for you, but I'm going to send you this book, and I'm going to recommend that you start with this chapter, because when you do, it'll help you not make this mistake in your business, and you'll probably be able to do it in a matter of 10 minutes. But you don't have to read the other book. But I promise you, if you don't read it, it won't work. So here's the book. That's me hitting the 5 steps. So acknowledging is seeing them as a human, because human beings are required to feel seen, heard, respected, or loved, to feel safe. They want to be seen. We want to be seen, which means the easiest way is when you're communicating with somebody and they ask you a question, they give you an objection, you acknowledge them for that question or that objection because they want to be seen. And then you're preparing them, but you're only preparing them for the next step, not the next 500 steps. And so if somebody's coming in and you're like, hey, I'd love a tour of the gym. And you'd be like, oh my God, amazing. I would love to give you a tour. But before I give you a tour, I want to explain a few things to you, because it's important before we walk around that you understand why we do this, and why we do this. That's the prepare step. You're just preparing them for the next step. Project is future pacing and letting them know that after this evolution you're going to do, what their life will look like, what their results will look like, right? And so, because when I'm done showing you the dojo, we're going to sit down and I'd love to answer any of your questions, because we really believe in family here. And that's about you and Johnny feeling comfortable. And we'd love to let Johnny even sit in as a class, but we have to do this first. And then pre-handle. Thinking about what objections you already know are going to happen, and you just nailed this, and speaking them up front, because that creates safety. And most people are afraid to say it, but if you don't say it, they feel it. And if they feel it, you've already lost them. You need to call out the obvious so that they feel empowered. Just like when you're like, hey, and there's going to be a time, and it's going to happen at week 3, probably 3 months, probably 6 months, and it's going to continue to happen where the dopamine wears off, where things get hard, where they're not progressing up belts as fast. And that's why it's even more important then to be consistent so that we can shift that belief. And what the excite step is basically saying, hey, now that we're the most prepared we've ever been, let's go do this thing. So it's like 3, 2, 1, go, right? Or class is in session, but only for that next evolution. I begin and end every conversation with those steps. I begin every call, every communication. And even when I'm emailing somebody something and they opt in for something, what are the first 5 steps that I hit when they opt in for something? Those ones. Oh, you're going to tell me you're going to give me a 7-day guide to help my son have more discipline at home? Well, that's like throwing me a playbook for a football player, but not telling me how to use it, what's in it, or what's there. It's like me saying, hey, I want to sign up and run a marathon with you, Matt. And you're like, great, put your running shoes on, go run 26.2 miles. And I'm like, you would never want that. You'd want a prep period.
Mm-hmm.
So I can very quickly shoot a video that goes with this lead magnet or with this thing that says, hey, with the 7-day challenge of like having more discipline at home, like, hey, I just wanted to acknowledge you and say thank you. Thank you for caring about you and your kid's future, because discipline is the most important thing to have when it comes to martial arts and life. But what we're going to send you is we're going to send you a video with a PDF for you to use, and it's got a 7-day workout for you to follow with the basic level, the intermediate level, and the expert level, because once you're done with these, the goal is to use them and put them into practice and use them consistently, even after the 7 days, because it takes time to create these results. And don't worry if you miss a day, or don't worry if he doesn't do all of it. It's really just about making sure that we start to change the behavior and do one thing a day to create momentum and progress. And so now that you have that, if you need anything, just shoot us an email, but here's a link to your PDF. And you're just prepping them. And here's the craziest thing about martial arts studios. You do this every day when class starts, when they get on the mat. You acknowledge them for being there. They bow, they do their thing. You tell them what you're going to be covering in class today, what it's going to look like, what they're going to be doing later. And then you pre-handle objections. And then you say, all right, you guys ready? Yep, go. And then you start warming up. And then when the warm-up's done, you bring them back on the mat and you're like, all right, amazing guys, good job on the warm-up. Now we're going to get into instruction. And so we do this naturally, but we forget to do it everywhere where it matters, which is before people come into our ecosystem, because that's where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, that is great, because there's definitely times we remember to do that and other times where we miss it. Like, I know that one of the things we moved away from in terms of automation was this like reminder text. So we're like, we need to do reminder videos. We've heard that a million times, but never actually did it. So now we do reminder videos as, hey, student name. Hey, Jack. I'm really excited. I'm really excited for you to come to school and meet you. My name is Mr. Brenner. I'm going to be your instructor today. I'm going to teach you all the basic moves. So when you come in today, don't worry, you're not going to be with anyone else. It's just going to be us. We're going to have so much fun. It's going to be easy to handle, and we're going to have a blast. And I'll be the one you look for, Mom, when you come in. All right. See you guys soon.
Yeah.
And that's like, 10 seconds. And then, okay, cool. We'll send 3 or 4 a night. It's not that crazy to do.
No,
right?
it's not. And here's the thing too. Texting and written is only 7% of communication. Reading a text doesn't make somebody feel safe. Everyone's like, George, why do you always send video messages? I'm like, well, first,
I loved your video message. I was like, ooh, this is good. I think I was out somewhere, so I couldn't respond with a video message. And I was like, if I don't respond now, I'll never do it. But I did love it. I was like, this is great.
But here's the thing. If I was to type out everything that's in there, it would be like this long and it wouldn't land. You can't read my energy. You can't feel my emotion. You can't feel my empathy. You can't understand who I am. Right. And really, when we're sending reminders, they're just invitations, right? It's connection points that lead people back home. I don't use Hansel and Gretel because they get led to the oven to die. So I use Jack and Jill because they become the hero of their own journey to get their water pail at the top. So I say Jack and Jill, but it's really Jack and Jilling them, right? And reminder texts are not like, oh, make sure you come to class. They're invitations, right? They're like, hey, Matt, I'm super, super stoked that you're going to be coming to roll with me later. Just as a quick reminder, make sure you bring your gi and a bottle of water. But when you get here, we'll make a plan together. And I'm just excited to spend some time with you. So I'll see you tonight. Shoot me a text if you have any questions. Right? Yeah. It takes 10 seconds.
I heard a different way someone packaged it. He said, The best marketing in the entire world is coming soon or what's coming next,
Yep.
right? So people need to know what's going to come when they come to the school. People want to know what's coming next in their consulting or marketing,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
They
Yep.
want to know what's coming next, and that'll keep people staying long, right? So we know that like we want our students to know when their next belt is, but also that's our short-term goal. What's their next long-term goal? When's their black belt, right? So their black belt might be, oh, you saved yourself from a stain. No stain, you're golden. It's just
Oh,
on the pants.
no.
It's
The
not anything.
stain's lower. It's just not going to
Wow.
be seen on
Okay.
camera
Great.
today
You're
because
gonna
I'm
get
not
crushed
changing the
up.
shirt. But the coffee just went straight through the hole in my lip.
uh, so yeah, making sure that they understand what their short and long term goal is. So hey, their long term goal might be black belt. Hey, you're gonna earn your black belt. It's 2024 now. It'll be about for karate about 2027. So about 3 years. Now that's your long term goal. Your short term goal is your yellow belt. And that'll happen. Our next belt testing is going to be in July. And if you
Mm-hmm.
keep on coming twice a week, that's when you'll earn your next one. Cool. Right? That's it. And we
Yep.
even have, I don't know where I got this from. We started doing this years ago, and it's been amazing where when people earn their white belt, we have the parent write down the black belt target date with a Sharpie on their belt. So they'll write BB and they'll write 2027 or 2028. And it's not going to be
Yep.
exact, right? But at least they have an idea, and we have the parent do it instead of us do it. So it's kind of like they're inscribing it.
Yep.
I don't know where we got that idea from. Took that one, and that's been really, really great for us. Can I ask you some like rapid fire questions?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay. Here's what I want to know about you personally. What's the best gift you've ever received?
My son.
Your son. Okay. How old is he? You said he's 7?
He is 7.5.
7. Okay. What's something new you want to try?
What's something new I want to try? Actually, fly fishing, and I'm doing it for the first time in a month. I live in
Okay.
Montana, and I've never done it. And all my guys are like, "We're doing it. We're doing it. We're going to Float River." I'm like, "That fishing thing's boring. I love nature, and I want to sit in space." They're like, "We're going fly fishing," and I'm like, "All right, let's stretch. This is out of my wheelhouse for me." So I'm actually pretty excited to try fly fishing.
Cool. I think fly fishing looks majestic whenever you see someone fly fishing in a pond.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've
I
never
think
done it
I'm
though.
scared of it though, because if I fall in love with it, you're just gonna see me in waders in a river, and no one's gonna find me anymore. Because I'm just gonna be out with Mother Nature and God all the time.
um, do you hunt?
I my joke was only humans.
Okay.
Um, and I have many rifles, but I made a rule with myself that if I ever hunt, it has to be fair. And since I can shoot a 6-inch target a mile away, I made a rule that if I hunt, I will only bow hunt. And
Only bow
so
hunt.
it's
Cool.
on my list to go get an elk with a bow in the next 2 to 3 years with one of my friends.
Very, very cool. I just started recently. I've only gone hunting 3 times, maybe 4, and I haven't even shot my rifle at an animal yet. So
Yep, yep. That's
I
what a lot
just,
of hunting is.
yeah, I was like, come on, at some point you got to give me a chance to get something. Like,
Yep, yep.
but it's still really fun to go for a walk. I love being outside too. What's one idea that you think the majority of people get wrong?
That business has anything to do with anything other than relationships, and everybody monetizes the wrong thing because there's only one thing you're actually monetizing, and it's
Hmm.
relationships, and it's the only currency that exists.
Hmm. What's a red flag in a work relationship?
My whole brain just went through 15 years of consulting. Um, the biggest red flag for me is somebody saying I know, because a student says I know and a master says thanks for the reminder.
Hmm. That's a really good one. Uh, let's see. What's your favorite snack?
Chocolate chip pancakes.
That's a snack. It's just like I'm gonna eat
Oh
this in
yeah,
between
it's my
meetings.
favorite food. Dude, my Facebook profile used to say we'll trade chocolate chip pancakes for marketing, and it took 2 years before somebody sent them to me, and then they got literally $100,000 of consulting for free. I waited and waited and waited. Somebody took it, and then the moment they did it, I changed it. But it was there for 2 years.
That's amazing. Let's see here. Tell me your favorite place you've traveled
Where I live, which is why I live here. I live at
in Montana.
15 minutes from the entrance of Glacier National Park, and so I spend 5 days a week outside in God's country.
Amazing. Very jealous of that. I was telling you I hiked Glacier. I think it was I've done a bunch of national parks.
Hmm.
I have like a water bottle that my friend gave me as a gift. So I'm like putting all the stickers of the national
Oh,
parks
dude,
I
I love
visited on
that.
there.
I love that, dude.
Yeah.
And you even did him like covered in a line. There's the martial artist in you. Yes.
Yeah. So last year I went to, or no, so, yeah, last year I went to Glacier Bay in Alaska. So that was pretty cool.
Oh, that's amazing.
It was on a cruise ship. It was kind of like a fake visiting national park, but still, I still got to put the sticker on.
Oh, and I
But
also,
I will
besides fly fishing, I want to go hella snowboard in Alaska.
hella snowboard. Okay, that
Yep.
sounds badass.
Yep.
Uh, when's the last time you cried?
2 minutes before we started this podcast.
Okay.
I cry about 6 times a day. I was in my Bible earlier praying for some people and myself, and tears are the largest super weapon in the world.
Hmm.
And people forget that if it's coming up, it's coming out, and they get addicted to stuffing it back down and wondering why they don't feel good.
Hmm. What is something people don't know about you?
God, since I'm so radically open about everything, I'd say that every day I wake up feeling more and more like an imposter, and more I have to learn, because I feel like my life's purpose is to be a humbled servant to every human on this planet, because love is the only thing that changes the world. And so I spend most of my days in tears at the end of my day, figuring out how to be better, processing every conversation, and asking who I get to be, to love my enemies, to love everybody else, because that's what God did.
Beautiful. What's a tool you've used in your business that everyone needs to know about?
Oh my God, Bonjoro, hands down. But now I do it manually. But Bonjoro is a video messaging app platform that allows you to connect with people at scale and send video messages to connect. And I used it for years, and I tried to tell people, and they're like, connections don't matter. Connections don't matter.
Wait, but why not just send a video on your iPhone, like directly through Instagram? Like,
Because
why?
with Bonjoro, you can do it up at scale. And so even in your funnels, even in programs, even in that, I can record one video and send it to 150 people, and I can put it in parts of processes. And so I will say video is the secret, but Bonjoro existed about 6 years ago, and nobody used it. But I will tell you, the answer to this is simplicity scales, and scale comes from subtraction, not addition. And so it's finding things that allow us to be in relationships at scale, and focusing on all the rest of it is using automations to get them out of the way. But that's it. So I still use Loom too. So like if I send an email, I don't write an email. I hate writing words. So I record a Loom, and I embed the moving GIF of the Loom in the email, so they get a video from me in their inbox.
That's awesome. Tell me about a time when a customer was really angry.
Ooh, pick one. Let's see a specific. Oh, actually, I'll tell you one right now. I had an incredible client in my office, and she came to me last year in April, and she wanted to scale her business. She was doing 30 grand a month, and she had the goal of doing 100 grand a month. And I told her this was about shifting her identity first, and then her beliefs second. And I was like, so in March, it was April. In May, it's going to go down. In June, it's going to go down, and you're going to call me and be really, really mad at me. And I'm just going to remind you of what we talked about, and you just have to trust me. And in May, I got an 11-minute Voxer message screaming at me, yelling at me, telling me how I was going to make her fail. And I just said, do you remember our conversation? And then I didn't hear from her for a week. I got a middle finger response. And in July, she hit 90K. August, she hit 150K. And she's not dropped below 150K since, and just passed the $5 million mark in her business. But those happen
Wow.
quite often.
That's so she's still working with you now, or do you just find that out later? Okay.
Yep.
Very, very cool. Last one. So you talked about a lot of trauma growing up. What's one treasured childhood memory that you have?
All of them. And the best one is thinking about how present my father was, even in the lens of all the addictions, and knowing that my father gave up so many of his own vices and pain to be present with me, and it just took me 35 years to see it. And unfortunately, it was too late. So I thank God and him every single day for making me the man that I am. But I cherish every moment, because perspective is the difference between your prison and your power. And it's how you choose to look at it. And I'll share this because we talked about trauma, and this is something I wish I heard 20 years ago. Your level of healing never has to match your level of trauma. If it's coming up, it's coming out. Just let it go, because it's only robbing you of the present.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for doing this with me. If people want to get in contact with you, what's the best way to find you?
Oh yeah, man. I'll do this with you anytime. This was a blast. I can't wait to talk to you more. Like I'm in. I'll do this all day. Coffee conversations, whatever we talk about. We can go
I'll
hike
come fly
glacier and
fishing.
we can go hike glacier and record it. We'll just throw mics on us. Like it's game on, man. I'll talk to you all day. You're amazing.
I appreciate
The
that.
the easiest way to connect with me, so my podcast is called the Mind of George Show, but mindofgeorge.com is where everything is. It's the pinkest website you'll ever see. And if anybody has any questions,
Like
if
the
any
color pink.
yeah, the color pink. It's my favorite
Okay.
color. My whole website's
Okay.
pink. Um,
Okay.
the Mohawk's getting dyed pink, by the way. That's why the Mohawk's coming back.
Okay.
But my website's mindofgeorge.com. But I genuinely mean this. If you have any questions, if I opened any loops, shoot me a DM on Instagram and you can ask me anything and I will personally respond. My Instagram is It's George Bryant, but the It's is included. So it's ITSGeorgebryant. And if I can help you, support you, answer any questions, do anything, I am just here to serve and support. So it would either be my podcast or Instagram.
Cool. And if you're listening and you want to grow your martial arts school organically by harvesting the strong relationships in your community to grow your school, you can email me, Matthew@wdojo.com, or find me on Instagram at blackbeltrunner1. Thanks, guys.